Find something that you can connect on, build trust. You're the one who holds the license. You're the professional here. You know insurance. The last couple of years, I guess since this whole worldwide pandemic thing, the world has obviously shifted their focus. We've seen some changes in the way that people do business, and buyers have grown to expect a certain level of client experience, so to speak. And they want that not only with their Amazon packages and their groceries, but also their insurance. And let's be real honest, as we've talked about before, they've all been spoiled by the Amazons of the world with speed and effectiveness of online shopping. It's one of those things that I've been accustomed to the same thing, and I've turned in the same way. And so people are looking not only for a transactional experience, but also a customer experience. I think that it's become kind of a fun little buzzy word kind of thing, but it's also so important and so crucial. And so obviously the beginning of the customer experience is the customer acquisition. That's the quote. That is obtaining the customer. That looks like several different things. And so we titled this blog The Perfect Quote Process. But what I want to do is talk about in this podcast your perfect quote process, because I think it's different for every agency. It's not going to be the same for every single agency. So it's got to be what works best for you. Now, I've got some ideas. I've got some thoughts around it that coincide with the way APP believes the ways things should be done, but it's got to work for your agency. It's got to be something that's set from a leadership standpoint and followed all the way through, whether you're a producer or an account manager or a CSR, whatever your role is in the agency, the quote process should be something that is followed uniformly across the board. One of the things I want to talk about before you can even get started in setting up your perfect quote process, we've got to look at several things here. We've got to look at the technology in your agency. And so many people have their own thoughts about certain things that they do within their agency. And one of the big things that has been a debate for years in the industry is the idea of raters. And so many people say, well, Heath, you can't use raters because they're inaccurate, or you have so much follow up within the carriers. You got to go to the carrier system anyway. So you might as well just go there first. And I understand that. And my argument to that is what you're looking at the raters for is not in line with what we're talking about here in the perfect quote situation. What we're looking for to use the rater is more of a speed situation. It's more of getting the information without duplicate entry, without having to do it in such an old school manner. The way I came into the industry was you got your notepad, you write everything down on there, then you put it in each individual carrier system, and then you go through and you finalize and you go through and spreadsheet the top quotes and all of those kind of things. What a rater does is eliminate all of that and does it in one swoop, one fell swoop. You go in there and you document all the information in there, all the information that you gather, and then it spreadsheets the top carriers for you. It goes through and it lets you know what's there. And it also puts it in your management system. It implements with so many other things. And it's one of those things that I think a rater, however you feel about it, is crucial in the quote process because it's going to help you with that speed and accuracy that so many consumers have been accustomed to throughout the last several years. And we've also, let's face it, our prospects have been trained and conditioned by social media ads, TV ads, radio ads. They can get a quote faster and more efficiently with direct consumer carriers, that 15% or more could be saved in 15 minutes or less, or by shopping here, they can get you this or whatever that might be. And they've been conditioned to go on price alone and not necessarily on coverage or value add from an agency standpoint. So we want to fix that. We want to come in your quote process and eliminate all of those conversations. By adding just that little piece of technology of the rater, I think it's going to make things that much better. We talked earlier about the process of setting up this perfect quote. You have to look at the people in your agency and make sure you have the right people in the right seats, the go-getters, the Tiggers of the agency that are doing this and are excited about it. They're passionate about coverage and about education, whatever that might be within your quote process. You got to have those right people in those seats. Otherwise, the process is going to be impeded by that. You also want to look at the carriers within your agency. Part of the quote process, and you might think, well, I got to have these carriers because they're the competitive ones, or they're this, or they're that. But if you have the wrong carriers, they can impede the process as well because some carriers don't work with raters well. Some don't download, some don't upload, some don't this, some don't that. And so you got to make sure that you look for the right carriers to fit your mix, to fit your agency, to fit your process. A combination of those couple of things are some suggestions I would say to look at as you're setting up the sales process, the perfect quote process, I should say. Once you've gone through and you've decided what is important for you and your agency and technology and the people and the carriers, now I feel like from there, the next phase has got to be the implementation. That's hard for me to say. The implementation of the process there. I did it again. So what we want to do there is we want to go through just a quote process that is engaging and that is almost fun for the prospect. So many times they've been through, and you've even been through this yourself when you called to get a quote for insurance. It almost sounds robotic, or it almost sounds like it is a transaction instead of a quote process or a fun experience, going back to that customer experience. It's been noted before, and we've talked about in other podcasts here at APP about me. So I won't go too deep into this on this show, but I'm all about building rapport. And so part of the implementation, I can't say it. Part of that process has got to be gathering information in a way of building rapport. It's got to be something that is not robotic, not like an interview or an interrogation. It's got to be more of an exciting, fun, gathering information. It's got to be a building rapport. You got to look for ways to connect with the prospect, find common ground, find commonalities, find something that you can connect on so that throughout you can build trust. As we've talked about before many a times, and you know the old saying, people like to do business with those who they know, like, and trust. And that is such an important part of the process. And so we want to make sure that that is something that we want to do. And so building rapport is something that you got to do to be able to make them trust you, make them like you, make it a familiar situation. And as we move through into the next part of that, gathering information, you can't be so transactional. It's not fun for them. They make so many phone calls a day and have to do so many things to check off their checklist that we want to make this quote process or this call one of the most important calls or the fun calls of their day. If y'all can laugh a little, you can have some memorable moments throughout that process, then it will enhances your opportunity to close. And so I think that is huge. And I will always be a part, that'll be always be a part of any process that I go through is building rapport. Now, as part of the building rapport, I think another huge part of this has got to be direct entry into either the management system, into a form, or the rater itself. Again, going back to what I said earlier, the quote process has got to eliminate duplicate entry, I should say. It's got to be something that's directly inputted because, again, it's about speed and accuracy. It's about getting back to the prospect as quickly as possible. And so by eliminating the back and forth, by eliminating the duplicate entry, by eliminating all the paperwork in between, you're going to be able to get that much quicker and enhance the ability to close on that prospect. So again, throughout that, it's going to take some time. You may have to slow down to speed up, as we say at APP. However, once you've mastered it, it will become a key component to the process that cannot be skipped. It's got to be put straight in to the system. So once you've done that, once you've built the rapport, once you've gathered the information, done your fact finding, so to speak, to use a more old school terminology, then I think we've got to get into the part of the phase 2, I guess, is delivering of that quote. And that's a very important part of the process because once you've built that rapport, once you've gathered that, then you've got to be able to deliver that in a way that's personal. And I believe the stance of agency performance partners as well is it's got to be done live, whether that's in person, over the phone, or on a video call, something to that effect. It's got to be done that way because, again, you're the one who holds the license. You're the professional here. You know insurance because it's your life. It's your everyday thing. You're probably an insurance nerd like me, so coverages come naturally to you. But when you're delivering that quote to your prospect, they don't know. They don't know what a deductible is. They don't know what the equipment breakdown is, they don't know the liability coverages and what they should have. They just look at the bottom line of the price. I think this got to be done live on the phone, live in person, or live on a video quote, on a Zoom call, Skype, whatever that method might be. I think it's got to be done that way so that you can answer questions, so you can build that trust, so you can show your value by educating them on the coverages that you put in there. It doesn't have to be a 30-minute call. It doesn't have to be an hour-long call. It could be done in a short amount of time, but you got to be able to walk them through the quote and not just email them the quote. That is our big pet peeve at APP, is just emailing the quote. Because if you're just emailing that quote, what's going to happen? They're going to get confused. They're not going to know what they're looking at, and they're just going to skip all the way down to the price and see whether it's in line or it's not, if it's competitive or it's not. Then you also risk them just forwarding that on to somebody else. Hey, John Doe agent just sent me this quote. Can you match it? And then you're in trouble. So we feel like the quote process must be delivered. The quote must be delivered live in person. And once that's done, then I think you should be able to have a much better chance of closing that deal and eliminating any kind of confusion. And so, again, that is such a crucial part of the process. For time's sake, I'm going to go ahead and get into, once we've delivered that quote and once we've done it over the phone and not via email, then I think there comes a place when you've got to have that follow up. And the follow up is such a big part of it too, because so many agents don't. So many producers, account managers don't. They deliver the quote and then they just move on to the next thing because they're transactional. They don't see it as a process. They don't see it as a relationship building opportunity. They don't see it as the way that we do. And that is to follow up. And I put some stats in there, and I think they're so important. I talked about it on a 3-minute video and it's been documented before and it's been discussed, and it may have even changed, but it's still, I think, a fascinating stat to look at, that 80% of sales require 5 follow-ups. That 44% of salespeople, especially in the insurance industry, give up after 1 no. They're just like, "Oh, they don't want it, let's move on," or 1 ghosting, or whatever you want to call it. 92% of salespeople give up after 4 no's. So that being said, that tells me that you should follow up at least 5 times, and you're going to have a higher percentage of closing that deal. And that's got to be a part of the process of following up. And I think too many times we have to remember, let's just talk about this for a minute. Let me pause here for a minute and dive in here, because you have to remember this is not near as important to them as it is to you. Yes, they did call you to get a quote, but in their mind, there's no urgency. There's no sense of, let's get this done right away. You've got to set that sense of urgency. You've got to let them know what's going on. You've got to be able to follow up, set those expectations, and let them know in the beginning, once I deliver the quote, I'm going to follow up with you. I'm going to make sure, so that they expect the follow up. And that when you do follow up, it's not a burden or it's not a bother. The follow up then becomes something that's impressive. Oh, yeah, I forgot. He told me he was going to follow up, or she told me she was going to follow up after this or that. And I might even be transparent enough to say, hey, part of our process, we're going to follow up with you up to 4 or 5 times. So they expect it. They know it's going to happen. And you can let them know how important it is that we get it done in a timely manner. And maybe you use an early quote discount as part of it. Or maybe you let them know that with time, quotes can change. Maybe you let them know, whatever it might be. I'm not saying use scare tactics by any means, but just let them know the follow-up process. And if you could follow up and let them know, then that shows them that you care. That shows them that they're important to you. That shows them that, hey, if this guy follows up with me this time to earn my business, imagine what it's going to be like in the customer experience that he's going to do to keep my business, to retain my business. So again, going back to the customer experience, the customer journey, that follow-up has got to be a big part of that. And that lets them know what to expect in the future from your agency, which sets you apart from everyone else out there. So again, establishing a perfect quote process for your agency, it is got to be, number one, uniform across the agency. Number two, it's got to be specific to your agency. And the last part of the quote process I think is so important is documentation. Whether you win or lose, it's got to go in the management system. It's got to be documented of why they did or why they didn't buy from you. All the necessary things have got to go in the file. If they didn't go with you, if they went with another one, why they didn't, and when you should follow up, whether that's 6 months, 8 months, 9 months from now, when you should follow up. If they did, success was made, hallelujah, and you did well and you got the close, then we got to document all those pertinent information. Make sure all the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, and you got the correct driver list. You've got the correct mortgagee information, all the additional insureds, the banking information, all that kind of stuff has got to be documented correctly and put in the system. If they decline coverages that you offered them, you got to put that in the system as well to say, I offered umbrella, they declined. I offered life, they declined. Again, not only just to protect the agency, protect you as well. So they can't come back when they have a claim situation, say, hey, so and so never offered this. Yeah, actually, we did. And here's the documentation of where you said no to umbrella, or you said no to equipment breakdown, or you said no to this or that coverage. So that's good. Got to be a big part of the process of documenting and closing that file. Guys, I hope that this has helped you, and I hope this is something that you see as a value. I hope this is something that you can, develop as part of your perfect quote process. So it's got to be something that fits within your people, your technology. It's got to be something that fits within your carrier scheme. It's also got to be something that is documented. You've got follow up. You've got all the things that we talked about in there. And I think that that's a huge part of it. And you've got to figure out a way to eliminate the duplicate entry. We use raters. We advocate for raters. But if not, you've got to figure out a system that works for you to be able to get back to them with speed and accuracy. Guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I look forward to hanging out with you on the next one.